The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of alien representatives filled their floating seats around the central platform where Chairman Vexter stood like a living statue made of blue-white crystal that caught and reflected the light from a dozen different suns streaming through the transparent walls. Jake Morrison sat in the human delegation section, which was positioned far from the center in an area typically reserved for minor species and observers. His worn diplomatic uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate robes and biomechanical suits worn by representatives from the major galactic powers who controlled most of the known galaxy through military might and economic influence that had been built over thousands of years. The emergency session had been called after the Zephyrian Empire delivered an ultimatum that shocked even the most war-hardened species in the galaxy, because the Zephyrians were known for their brutal efficiency and had never bothered with warnings before, simply taking what they wanted through overwhelming force and superior numbers that could crush any resistance before it. Even began Commander Lisa Brooks watched from the observation deck above, where military liaisons from various species gathered to witness what many believed would be the formal surrender of humanity, to avoid total extinction at the hands of the most feared military force in known space, which had destroyed entire civilizations, for far less provocation than what they claimed humanity had given them. The Zephyrian ambassador was a massive creature that stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms, ending in razor-sharp claws and skin that looked like living metal, which shifted from silver to deep red depending on the creature's emotional state. And right now it was an angry crimson that meant violence was close at hand. The human species has been found guilty of illegal expansion into Zephyrian territorial claims, the ambassador announced in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. They have established 17 colonies in sectors that rightfully belong to the Empire and have refused all reasonable demands to withdraw from these areas, despite clear warnings about the consequences of such actions. Jake Morrison knew this was completely false because the colonies in question had been established in empty space that no species had ever claimed, and the Zephyrians had only declared ownership after discovering that the human settlements contained valuable mineral deposits that could be used to build more warships for their ever-expanding fleet. Chairman Vextar's crystalline form rang like a bell as he spoke. The council recognizes the territorial claims of the Zephyrian Empire as valid under galactic law and calls upon the human delegation to respond to these serious accusations that could result in military action, if not resolved through peaceful negotiation. The out-delegate leaned forward with her 6 eyes blinking in sequence. Perhaps the humans could be relocated to less contested areas of the galaxy where they would not interfere with the territorial integrity of established empires, and could continue their development under the protection of more advanced species who understand the complexities of galactic politics. Several other delegates murmured agreement, because humanity was widely viewed as a young and naive species that had barely developed faster than light travel, and whose military consisted of a few hundred outdated ships that would be no match for even a small Zephyrian patrol fleet, let alone the massive armada that was already moving toward human space. The Centaurian trade representative stood up on his 4 legs. The humans have valuable resources that should not be wasted through unnecessary conflict, and I propose that their territories be divided among species that can properly utilize these assets for the benefit of galactic civilization as a whole, rather than leaving them in the hands of those who lack the experience to manage them effectively. Jake Morrison listened to the debate with a calm expression that gave no hint of what he was really thinking, as alien species discussed carving up human territory like it was already conquered land, and the people living there were just obstacles to be moved out of the way or eliminated entirely if they proved too stubborn to relocate peacefully. The Zephyrian ambassador's skin shifted to an even deeper red. The Empire offers humanity one final opportunity to avoid complete destruction by surrendering all territorial claims and submitting to Zephyrian authority within 72 hours, or face the consequences of their defiance, which will be swift and absolute, with no mercy shown to those who resist. 50,000 ships are already moving toward human space, the ambassador continued, and they carry weapons capable of sterilizing entire worlds in minutes. So I advise the human delegation to consider carefully whether their pride is worth the lives of billions of their people who will die if they choose resistance over wisdom. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned toward Jake Morrison, who sat quietly for several long moments before slowly standing up with the kind of calm dignity that comes from absolute confidence in one's position. Even when facing impossible odds, the human delegation requests a 48-hour delay to consult with Earth Command regarding this ultimatum. Jake said in a steady voice that carried clearly through the vast chamber, "We need time to consider all options and ensure that any decision we make has the full support of our people." And Government Chairman Vexter S. Crystal Form chimed softly, "The Council grants this request and expects a formal response within the specified time frame, after which the Zephyrian Empire will be free to take whatever action they deem necessary to protect their territorial integrity." The Altarian delegate shook her head sadly. "I hope the humans will choose survival over pointless resistance, because no species has ever successfully opposed the Zephyrian Empire, and those who tried are now remembered only as cautionary tales told to young civilizations about the price of defying superior power." As the session ended and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Jake Morrison activated his personal communicator and sent a brief coded message that would travel faster than light to reach Earth Command within hours, where it would trigger protocols that had been in place for over 2 centuries but had never been activated, because humanity had never faced a threat serious enough to justify revealing their true capabilities. Commander Lisa Brooks approached Jake as the observation deck emptied. "Do you really think they'll authorize protocol, Omega? After all these years of maintaining the deception that has kept us safe from this exact kind of situation, Jake?" Morrison smiled for the first time since the session began. "Lisa, the Council is about to learn something that will change their understanding of humanity forever. And I suspect they're not going to like what they discover when we stop pretending to be weak." The message Jake had sent contained only 7 words, but they would trigger the most significant military mobilization in human history and reveal to the galaxy that Earth had been playing a very different game than anyone realized. Admiral Kevin Hayes received the Protocol Omega authorization while standing in the deepest levels of Cheyenne Mountain, where the real Earth Command had operated in complete secrecy for over 200 years since humanity first made contact with alien civilizations and realized that the galaxy was a much more dangerous place than anyone had imagined. The massive underground complex stretched for miles beneath the Colorado mountains and contained facilities that would have amazed even the most advanced alien species if they had known such technology existed on what they considered a primitive backwater world, whose greatest achievement was barely functional faster than light travel. Colonel Amy Carter stood before a holographic display that showed the true scope of human military assets scattered throughout the solar system and beyond, in hidden bases that had been constructed over generations by people who understood that survival sometimes required deception on a scale that few species could maintain for more than a few decades. Operation Looking Glass has been monitoring galactic communications for the past 150 years, Amy explained to her assembled staff officers, and we have detailed intelligence on every major power, including complete tactical assessments of their military capabilities, political structures, and economic dependencies that they believe are closely guarded secrets. Dr. Richard Stone activated another display that showed technical specifications for weapon systems that made human plasma cannons look like children's toys compared to the devastating firepower that had been developed in complete secrecy by research teams working in facilities hidden throughout the asteroid belt and outer planets where no alien scout ships would ever think to look. The ships the Council believes represent our entire space fleet are actually obsolete training vessels that we use to maintain the illusion of technological inferiority. Richard continued, while our real warships incorporate quantum displacement drives that allow instantaneous travel to any point in the galaxy without the limitations of traditional jump gates or hyperspace corridors. Captain Ryan Phillips brought up a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy that was marked with thousands of red dots representing human assets that had been placed in strategic locations over the course of 2 centuries through careful planning and patience that most alien species lacked because they focused on immediate gains rather than long-term positioning. Every major alien government has been thoroughly infiltrated by human operatives using genetic modification technology that allows them to pass as native members of their target species, Ryan explained, and these agents have provided us with intelligence about political developments, military movements, and technological advances that give us significant advantages in any potential conflict. The assembled officers studied the displays with expressions of grim satisfaction because they had all spent their entire careers preparing for this moment when humanity would finally reveal its true nature to a galaxy that had consistently underestimated and dismissed them as irrelevant players in the great game of interstellar politics. Admiral Hayes activated his personal command console and began issuing orders that would mobilize military assets hidden throughout human space and beyond, in locations that alien intelligence services had never discovered, despite their best efforts to map human capabilities and determine whether Earth posed any kind of threat to established powers. Task Force Retribution will consist of 1,200 ships drawn from the 5th, 7th, and 9th Fleets, Hayes announced, and they will demonstrate to the Zephyrian Empire and the entire galaxy exactly what happens when you threaten humanity with extinction without understanding who you're really dealing with. Colonel Janet Lewis brought up detailed tactical analyses of Zephyrian military doctrine, which had been studied extensively by human strategists, who had identified numerous weaknesses in their supposedly invincible fleet formations that relied too heavily on overwhelming firepower and traditional space combat techniques that worked well against conventional opponents. The Zephyrians based their entire strategy on the assumption that their enemies will engage them in direct frontal assaults using standard weapons and defensive systems, Janet explained, but they have no experience fighting an opponent that can appear anywhere on the battlefield without warning and strike from multiple directions. Simultaneously, Dr. Stone activated a secure communication link to research facilities throughout the solar system, where weapons that had been theoretical concepts just decades earlier were now ready for deployment against enemies who had no idea such technology even existed, because humanity had been very careful to hide their true scientific achievements. Dark matter beam weapons will cut through Zephyrian shields like they're made of paper, he reported, and our quantum torpedo systems can phase directly through enemy hull armor to detonate inside their ships, where conventional defensive measures are completely useless against this type of attack. The intelligence reports flowing in from human operatives embedded within alien governments painted a clear picture of how the galaxy viewed the current crisis, with most species expecting humanity to surrender without a fight because no rational civilization would choose certain destruction over peaceful submission to superior force. Captain Phillips reviewed the deployment orders for human ships that had been positioned throughout Zephyrian space for months in advance, using stealth technology so advanced that even direct sensor sweeps failed to detect their presence while they gathered intelligence and prepared for the moment when they would reveal themselves. The enemy fleet is following exactly the approach vectors our models predicted, Phillips reported, and they have no idea that we've been watching their every move since they left their home system 3 weeks ago, while maintaining complete operational security about our own military preparations. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical situation with the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades planning for this exact scenario and knew that humanity held advantages that would shock the galaxy when they were finally revealed in actual combat against an enemy that considered itself invincible. The Zephyrians believe they're facing a desperate species with outdated weapons and primitive tactics, Hayes said, but they're about to discover that humanity has been playing a very different game for the past 2 centuries, and we've been winning without them even knowing a contest was taking place. Colonel Carter activated communication systems that would coordinate the largest military operation in human history while maintaining the absolute secrecy that had protected Earth's true capabilities from discovery by alien intelligence services that would have reacted very differently to first contact if they had known what humanity was really capable of achieving. All fleet commanders have confirmed readiness status, she reported, and our operatives within the Galactic Council are prepared to provide real intelligence about political reactions when the galaxy realizes that their assumptions about humanity have been completely wrong for over 200 years. The moment had finally arrived for humanity to step out of the shadows and reveal that the species the galaxy had dismissed as primitive newcomers were actually the most advanced military power in known space and had been quietly preparing for this revelation since their first contact with alien civilizations. Grand Admiral Vecma stood on the command bridge of his flagship, surrounded by tactical displays showing 50,000 Zephyrian warships moving in perfect formation toward human space with the kind of overwhelming force that had conquered dozens of civilizations and never once tasted defeat in over 3 centuries of expansion across the galaxy. The massive Zephyrian fleet stretched across several light years of space, with heavy battleships at the center protected by screens of destroyers and cruisers, while reconnaissance vessels scouted ahead for any signs of human resistance that intelligence reports suggested would be minimal at best, given their primitive technology. And small fleet-sized Lieutenant Colonel Steve Parker commanded the advanced human reconnaissance force, consisting of just 12 ships that suddenly appeared on Zephyrian sensors without any warning because quantum displacement technology allowed instantaneous travel that bypassed all known methods of faster-than-light detection systems used throughout the galaxy. 12 ships, laughed the Zephyrian tactical officer as he studied the sensor readings. The humans send 12 ships against 50,000 and expect to accomplish what exactly, other than providing us with target practice before we proceed to destroy their colonies and home world? Grand Admiral Vecma examined the tactical display with amusement because human ships appeared to be using outdated plasma cannon systems and basic kinetic weapons that would barely scratch the paint on Zephyrian hull armor, which had been designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known to galactic civilization. Open communication channels to all human vessels, Decima ordered, and offer them one final opportunity to surrender before we demonstrate why no species has ever successfully resisted the Zephyrian Empire when we choose to expand our territorial claims. Through military force, Steve Parker received the surrender demand while his small fleet held position at the edge of the massive Zephyrian formation and responded by activating broad-spectrum communication systems that would broadcast the coming battle to every major civilization in the galaxy so they could witness what happened when someone finally chose to fight back. This is Lieutenant Colonel Parker of the Earth Defense Force. His voice carried across galactic communication networks, and I want everyone listening to understand that what you're about to see represents only a tiny fraction of humanity's true military capabilities, which have been hidden for over 2 centuries. The Zephyrian fleet commanders laughed at what they considered typical human arrogance from a species that had never fought a real war and had no understanding of what modern space combat involved when conducted by professionals who had perfected the art of destruction through countless victories against technologically inferior opponents. Gave the order to open fire, expecting to vaporize the human ships in seconds, but instead watched in growing confusion as the 12 vessels began moving in ways that defied everything he understood about space combat tactics and technology, because they seemed to be phasing in and out of normal space at will. Human ships attacked without warning, using weapons that discharged beams of coherent dark matter which cut through Zephyrian shields like they were made of tissue paper, while simultaneously targeting critical systems with a precision that suggested complete knowledge of enemy ship designs and vulnerabilities. Colonel Janet Lewis coordinated the main assault as 1,200 human warships materialized throughout the Zephyrian formation, using quantum displacement drives to appear inside enemy defensive perimeters where conventional tactics assumed no hostile forces could possibly reach without fighting through multiple layers of protection. The Zephyrian fleet found itself fighting an enemy that violated every principle of space warfare they had ever learned, because human vessels could appear anywhere on the battlefield without warning, strike with devastating effectiveness, and disappear before return fire could be directed against them with any hope of success. Impossible, Decima whispered as he watched human ships phase through solid matter to attack from angles that should not have existed, while their weapons systems demonstrated technology that was centuries beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Deployed in actual combat situations, human tactical doctrine emphasized speed and precision over raw firepower, with each ship functioning as an independent unit capable of devastating attacks before vanishing into quantum space where enemy sensors could not track them and weapons could not reach them, no matter how advanced or powerful they might be. Systematic destruction of the Zephyrian fleet proceeded with mechanical efficiency as human ships targeted command vessels, first to disrupt enemy coordination, then moved on to heavy weapons platforms before finishing off the remaining ships that were now scattered and unable to mount any kind of organized resistance. Captain Ryan Phillips monitored the battle from his command ship, while human vessels demonstrated combat capabilities that shocked even experienced military observers throughout the galaxy who had believed they understood the limits of what was possible in space warfare until witnessing technology that redefined those limits. Completely enemy fleet strength reduced to 60% and falling rapidly, Phillips reported, as Zephyrian ships continued to be destroyed or disabled at a rate that meant the engagement would be over within hours rather than the days or weeks that conventional space battles typically required between forces of similar size. The few ships that managed to score hits on human vessels discovered that their most powerful weapons had no effect because human defensive systems incorporated the same quantum technology that allowed their ships to phase in and out of normal space, while redirecting incoming fire into alternate dimensions. Grand Admiral Vecma watched his supposedly invincible armada being systematically dismantled by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive, while communications from his surviving ships painted a picture of technological superiority that made Zephyrian military doctrine look like ancient history. "How is this possible?" demanded the Zephyrian tactical officer. "Our intelligence reports clearly stated that human technology was centuries behind our own, and their fleet consisted of a few hundred obsolete vessels that posed no threat to even our smallest patrol groups." The answer came as more human ships continued to appear from quantum space while demonstrating weapons and defensive capabilities that no known species possessed, because humanity had spent 2 centuries developing technology in complete secrecy while maintaining the illusion of technological inferiority. Within 4 hours of the first shots being fired, the Zephyr fleet had been reduced to less than 3,000 functional vessels, while human casualties remained at exactly 0. Because their ships had never actually been hit by enemy fire, thanks to quantum defensive systems that made them effectively untouchable. The surviving Zephyrian ships received orders to retreat immediately, while their commanders tried to process what they had witnessed and understand how a species they had considered barely above primitive had just destroyed the most powerful military force in galactic history. With casual ease, news of the battle spread across the galaxy within hours as communication networks carried reports of humanity's shocking victory over the Zephyrian Empire, while military analysts struggled to understand how such a devastating defeat had been possible for forces that had never known anything but triumph. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as emergency reports flooded in from across the galaxy, while representatives who had gathered to witness humanity's expected surrender instead found themselves trying to process news that defied everything they thought they knew about galactic power structures and military capabilities. Chairman Vextor's crystalline form flickered between colors as his internal systems struggled to process the incoming data streams that painted an impossible picture of the species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers just days earlier, when the Zephyrian ultimatum had seemed like a simple matter of one major power absorbing the territory of a minor civilization. "This cannot be accurate," declared the Altarian Defense Minister as her 6 eyes blinked rapidly while she reviewed sensor logs from the battle that showed human ships using technology that was theoretically impossible according to everything their scientists understood about quantum mechanics and space-time manipulation. The Centaurian trade representative stood on his 4 legs with obvious distress as his financial analysts calculated the economic implications of a galaxy where humanity possessed military technology that could make conventional defensive systems obsolete and reshape the balance of power that had remained stable for thousands of years. Ambassador Jake Morrison entered the chamber with a completely different demeanor than the deferential diplomat who had requested a 48-hour delay to consider the Zephyrian ultimatum, because now he moved with the confidence of someone who knew that every assumption the council had made about his species was about to be proven catastrophically wrong. "The human delegation has prepared a comprehensive response to recent events," Jake announced as his aide activated holographic displays that began showing real-time images from human ships positioned in orbit around every major alien homeworld throughout the galaxy, without any of their defense systems detecting the approaching vessels. General Patricia Kim stepped forward with a massive data storage device that contained 2 centuries worth of intelligence gathered by human operatives who had infiltrated every significant government, military organization, and corporate entity in galactic civilization, while maintaining perfect cover identities that had never been suspected by even the most paranoid security services. We have been documenting galactic activities since our first contact with alien civilizations, Patricia explained, and our records include detailed evidence of corruption, illegal territorial seizures, suppression of emerging species, war crimes, and treaty violations that span millennia and involve every major power represented in this chamber. The revelation that human intelligence capabilities extended far beyond what anyone had imagined sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates, who realized that their most sensitive communications and secret operations had been monitored by a species they had considered technologically inferior and politically naive. Agent Carl Rodriguez revealed the scope of human infiltration by activating genetic modification systems that allowed him to shift between different alien appearances, while explaining how thousands of human operatives had been living among alien populations for generations without their true nature ever being discovered by security forces that prided themselves on their thoroughness. Every major government has human agents in positions of significant influence, Carl continued, and we have been providing intelligence support to resistance movements, documenting atrocities, and preparing for the day when humanity would be strong enough to demand galactic reform through negotiation or force. If necessary, Chairman Vextar's crystal structure began resonating at frequencies that indicated extreme stress as he processed the implications of humanity's deception and realized that every council session, every private meeting, and every secret negotiation had been observed and recorded by human intelligence operatives who now possessed enough evidence to destroy the political careers of every major leader in the galaxy. The Zephyrian ambassador, who had delivered the ultimatum just days earlier, now stood silent, with his metallic skin shifting through colors that indicated confusion and fear, because his species had built their entire identity around military superiority that had just been proven to be an illusion when faced with truly advanced technology. The human population listed in official galactic records as 12 billion beings represents less than 2% of our actual numbers, Jake Morrison announced, because our real population, including off-world colonies, hidden habitats, and deep space installations, exceeds 800 billion individuals, making us the largest single species group in known space. The chamber fell completely silent as delegates struggled to process this information, because the implications were staggering when combined with humanity's demonstrated technological superiority and military capabilities that had just destroyed the most feared fleet in galactic history. With casual ease, Captain Helen Foster activated another display that showed the true extent of human space-based infrastructure, including massive shipyards hidden throughout the solar system and beyond, where advanced warships had been constructed for generations, using resources and manufacturing capabilities that made human industrial capacity far greater than any other species. The vessels you witnessed destroying the Zephyrian fleet represent approximately 0.1% of humanity's actual military strength, Helen explained, because we have been building defensive capabilities for over 2 centuries, while maintaining the illusion that our few hundred obsolete ships constituted our entire space force. Dr. Richard Stone presented technical specifications for human weapons and defensive systems that incorporated scientific principles unknown to galactic civilization, despite their thousands of years of technological development. Because humanity had taken completely different approaches to solving the fundamental problems of space travel and combat, we developed quantum displacement technology by abandoning traditional theories about faster-than-light travel, Richard explained, and our weapon systems utilize controlled dark matter manipulation that allows us to bypass conventional defensive measures while delivering devastating attacks that cannot be stopped by any known shielding technology. The economic implications of humanity's revelation became clear as trade representatives calculated how galactic commerce would be affected by the emergence of a major power that had been operating in complete secrecy while accumulating resources and developing technologies that could revolutionize or destroy existing market structures. Colonel Amy Carter revealed that human intelligence networks had been tracking illegal activities throughout the galaxy for decades and were prepared to release detailed evidence that would expose corruption at the highest levels of galactic government, while simultaneously Offering amnesty to those willing to support genuine reforms, we propose the establishment of a democratic federation of worlds with proportional representation based on population and contribution rather than military might, Amy announced, and we are prepared to share selected technologies with species that demonstrate commitment to peaceful cooperation and genuine reform of galactic institutions. The old order that had dominated galactic civilization for millennia was crumbling as delegates realized that humanity possessed not only the military power to enforce their demands, but also the intelligence capabilities to expose every secret that the major powers had used to maintain their positions of authority through intimidation and manipulation. Chairman Vextoff finally spoke in tones that rang with defeat. The Council recognizes that our previous assumptions about humanity were incorrect, and we are prepared to negotiate new arrangements that reflect the current balance of power while ensuring stability and prosperity for all member species. Jake Morrison smiled as he realized that the galaxy was about to experience the most significant political transformation in recorded history, and humanity would finally be able to implement the reforms they had been planning for over 2 centuries, while waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature. 3 months after the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet, the galaxy looked fundamentally different as the old Galactic Council was dissolved and replaced by the Democratic Federation of Worlds, where every species now enjoyed proportional representation based on actual population numbers and meaningful contributions to galactic civilization rather than military intimidation and economic manipulation. Admiral Kevin Hayes stood in the command center of the new Galactic Defense Force headquarters, watching as ships from dozens of different species worked together, using integrated command systems that combined the best technologies and tactical doctrines from across the galaxy. While human quantum displacement drives revolutionized fleet mobility and strategic planning, the former Zephyrian Empire had been transformed from a military dictatorship into a productive member of the galactic community as their surviving military leaders contributed their expertise in shield technology and defensive systems, while their industrial capabilities were redirected toward peaceful construction projects rather than building weapons of conquest. Richard Stone led the cooperative research initiative from a massive space station that orbited the galactic core, where scientists from hundreds of species worked together to develop medical advances that could extend lifespans across the galaxy, while environmental restoration techniques helped heal worlds damaged by centuries of exploitation and warfare. Though sharing of carefully selected human technologies proceeded under strict oversight to ensure that advanced capabilities would be used for peaceful purposes while maintaining humanity's technological advantages in critical areas that guaranteed their ability to enforce the new galactic order if necessary through overwhelming military superiority. Captain Lisa Brooks commanded one of the new integrated defense fleets where human ships worked alongside vessels from allied species to patrol trade routes and respond to emergencies throughout the galaxy, while demonstrating that cooperation was more effective than the old system of competing military powers. Ambassador Jake Morrison served as the first Secretary General of the Democratic Federation from offices on the former Council homeworld, where he worked with representatives from every member species to establish new laws and institutions that protected the rights of all sentient beings while preventing the kind of exploitation that had characterized galactic civilization. For millennia, the transformation had not been entirely peaceful, as several major powers initially resisted the new order until human fleets appeared in their home systems to demonstrate that resistance was futile when faced with technology that made their most advanced weapons look like primitive tools from a bygone era. Patricia Kim oversaw the integration of intelligence services from across the galaxy into a unified organization that focused on preventing conflicts rather than gathering information for competitive advantages, while human agents who had spent generations in deep cover finally revealed themselves and began working openly to build better societies. The economic revolution proceeded as rapidly as the political changes. because human industrial capabilities and resource extraction techniques allowed for unprecedented prosperity throughout the galaxy, while trade networks expanded to include previously isolated species who had been excluded from galactic commerce by the major powers. Agent Carl Rodriguez led training programs that taught alien intelligence operatives about human techniques for long-term infiltration and cultural analysis, while emphasizing the importance of understanding other species rather than simply spying on them for tactical advantages in potential future conflicts. The new galactic constitution established fundamental rights for all sentient beings, while creating mechanisms for peaceful resolution of disputes that had previously been settled through military force or economic coercion by powers that cared more about their own interests than justice or fairness. Captain Ryan Phillips directed the establishment of new shipyards throughout the galaxy, where human engineers worked with alien specialists to design vessels that incorporated the best features from multiple technological traditions, while quantum displacement systems allowed rapid response to emergencies anywhere in known space. Stone's research teams made breakthrough discoveries in fields ranging from medicine to agriculture by combining human scientific methods with alien knowledge bases that had been developed over thousands of years but had never been shared between species due to political barriers and military concerns. The integration process required careful management because many alien species had difficulty accepting that their understanding of galactic power structures had been completely wrong. For over 2 centuries, while humanity had been quietly building capabilities that surpassed anything they had thought possible, Colonel Amy Carter established new communication networks that allowed real-time coordination between Federation forces throughout the galaxy, while maintaining the security protocols that had protected human operations during their long period of secret preparation. For this transformation, the most significant change was cultural, as species that had viewed each other as competitors or threats began working together on projects that benefited everyone rather than pursuing narrow advantages that often came at the expense of other civilizations who lacked the power to protect their interests. Young alien officers trained alongside human personnel in integrated academies, where they learned that military strength should be used to protect peace rather than impose the will of stronger species on weaker ones, while technological superiority carried responsibilities rather than just opportunities for exploitation. Captain Helen Foster led diplomatic missions to species that had been isolated or oppressed under the old system, as the Federation reached out to include civilizations that had been ignored or exploited by the major powers who had controlled galactic politics through fear and intimidation. The transformation was not complete because changing attitudes and institutions that had existed for millennia required time and patience, but the foundation had been established for a truly cooperative galactic civilization where conflicts would be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. Young Altarian officer approached Captain Brooks after a joint training exercise and asked how humanity had managed to hide their true capabilities for so long while maintaining the deception that had protected them until they were ready to reveal themselves to the galaxy. Smiled as she explained that patience was perhaps the most human trait of all, because while other species reached for immediate power and dominance, humans had been willing to wait centuries to build something better than the cycle of conquest and exploitation that had characterized galactic history. The golden age that followed was not built on the ruins of defeated enemies, but on the foundation of cooperation between species that had learned to value wisdom over strength and justice over advantage. While humanity took its place as guardian of a peace they had spent 2 centuries preparing to protect the galaxy, discovered that true power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build and the patience to wait for the right moment to use overwhelming strength in service of creating something better than what had come before.